This video will guide you through how you use sources in your own writing. This is one of the writing skills that's necessary for you to learn in Humanities 9. So we'll be talking about how it is that you use sources and integrate them into your own writing. So first of all, let's talk about the definition of integrate. Integrate is a verb, that's the group to which it belongs. That means bringing together parts into a whole. That's the specific difference from the other verbs. Notice my fun little formal definition there. When you integrate a quotation, you are taking a part of someone else's words and bringing it together with the whole of your own paragraph. This integration has to accomplish two things. First of all, it has to make it clear where these other words are coming from. And second of all, it has to make it clear, and this is very important, how those words, the words of someone else's, fit into your own argument. So notice there's two things that you're trying to do when you integrate a source, integrate a quotation into your paragraph. Number one, you're trying to make it clear where these words come from. And number two, you're trying to make it clear how the words or ideas of another person fit into your own argument. So let's talk about how do you do that. Anytime you use a source, whether it is by paraphrasing or quoting, you will need to do three things. Let's think of it as a sandwich. You need to introduce, you need to quote and cite, and then you need to explain. This basic format is what's asked of you of all teachers, whether you're in 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th, 12th, or even beyond if you go to college. Some people call this the quotation sandwich, and I think that's a handy way to think of it. Here's the top slice, here's the bottom slice, and here's the stuff in the middle. When we're talking about the quotation sandwich, notice that the first thing that we're going to do is introduce the idea that the quotation will support. Then you're going to quote and cite, and then you'll explain. Different people call this bottom slice different things. We could call it explanation. We might call it sometimes analysis, where you break down the parts of the quote. And sometimes we just call it commentary. You talking about the quotation in a way that makes it clear why you're using this quotation in this paragraph. I think explain is a good kind of umbrella term to use. When you bring a quotation into your own paragraph, you have to integrate that quotation into the paragraph in two ways, and this is super important. This is what's going to set you apart as a high school student from what you did when you were a junior high student. First of all, you have to integrate that quotation grammatically. Grammatically, it must be contained within a sentence of your own. So that means you can't just have a sentence that is a quotation. You need to integrate that quotation into one of your own sentences, and we'll talk on the next page about what that looks like. And then second of all, this is very important, logically, it must support or illustrate your point. All right, let's talk about how you integrate both grammatically and logically on this next page. So for exercise 1, we're going to be talking about quoting and paraphrasing, and there's a few things in bold that you need to fill out. Right here, here, and here. So as soon as I get through this page in the video, you'll need to pause it and take your notes on this page. But let's go through each of these examples. Here's an example of a quotation that has been integrated into someone else's writing. So here's our top slice up here, our middle slice here, and our bottom slice down here. Let's read it together. Regarding Aristotle's lasting contributions to science, Charles Freeman asserts, comma, space, quotation marks. This is where our actual quotation begins. Aristotle wanted to understand not only the natural world, but the processes by which it could be understood, end quotation. And he taught that, begin quotation again, one had to use one's own senses, end quotation, in order to discover these processes. Space, parentheses 277, end parentheses, and their end punctuation mark comes outside of those parentheses. Please take note of the way that this is punctuated. You need to imitate this exactly. So let's look back at this introduction. This quotation is contained within a sentence of this paragraph. The sentence gives context and should relate to the topic of the paragraph. Based on this introduction regarding Aristotle's lasting contributions to science, Charles Freeman asserts, based on that introduction to my quotation, what would you guess that the rest of this paragraph is about? Go ahead and write that down. Now, let's look at the quotation. Because the author is mentioned by name in the introduction to this quotation, do you see his name? Charles Freeman. A name is not necessary in the parenthetical citation. If you had it here, it would be fine, but you don't have to have it here. Only a page number is absolutely needed. If I hadn't mentioned his name up here, I would have to put Freeman space 277. All right, let's talk about explain. Here, Freeman points out how Aristotle's reliance on his own careful observation of nature formed the basis of his philosophy. This is a brief explanation of the quotation. The student states in her own words the thing about this passage that she wants the reader to notice. If you're ever at a loss, if you're ever not knowing what you should put in the bottom slice of your quotation sandwich, you can always simply state in your own words what you want your reader to notice about that quotation. Let's go on to example number 2. Again, we have a quotation sandwich, top slice, bigger bottom slice, and the middle, the quotation. Let's look at how it's introduced. Charles Freeman argues that Aristotle improves Plato's path to virtue by pursuit of the good in that, and because we are introducing it with a that, we don't need a comma, we just start with our quotation. Aristotle felt instead that goodness was a quality related to a situation. What is right might vary from situation to situation, end quotation, and in parentheses just the page number. Freeman goes on to clarify that for Aristotle, comma, quotation, a guiding principle in any situation, quote, was to avoid extremes, quote. In other words, Aristotle agrees with Plato and Socrates that virtue is an action that aligns an individual with the good, but he saw that action as varying based upon the situation, and the guiding principle of the golden mean determined right action in each situation. Let's talk about this. This student places the quotation within their own sentence by giving the context surrounding the original quotation. What is the context of the original quotation? In other words, when Charles Freeman says these things, in what context? What is he talking about? Answer that question here. Let's look at how the student has used these ... things. The student broke up a long quotation by offering more context between the quotations and used an ellipses, that's the dot, space, dot, that is called an ellipses, to show that she had skipped some words in the original quotation. Why is it best to keep quotations as short as possible, as short and to the point as possible? Why would you want to do that? Think about that for a second and answer the question. Now let's look over at the explain. This explanation tells the readers what to notice about both the quotations. Notice there's one quotation here and another one here. The student has offered a little bit more context here. What would you expect to come next in the student's paragraph? After she's finished with her explain, she's finished telling her readers what to notice about her quotation. What do you think she's going to state next? What would be the sentence to come right here? Think about that. All right, we've talked about how to quote using the quotation sandwich, but sometimes you might realize I don't actually want to use someone else's words. I just need to paraphrase or summarize a part of, if you're writing about an epic, then maybe like part of the story, or maybe just a portion of the text that you read as your source for an essay. So how do you do that? How do you paraphrase or summarize? Paraphrasing and summarizing are also ways to use sources in your writing. For both paraphrase and summary, you use another person's ideas, but you put those ideas into your own words. For paraphrase, your explanation of the original is about the same length as the original. For summary, your explanation of the original is much shorter. Both still require parenthetical citations. You use those parenthetical citations no matter what, because that's how you communicate to your reader where you got your information from, which is extremely important. So for the practice here, I want you to identify the two passages below as either paraphrase or summary. Read over these and then decide, is this paraphrase, using the definitions up here, or is this summary, using the definition up here? And then I want you to consider, when and why would you use paraphrase? And remember, that's when you use another person's ideas but put them into your own words, and you use about the same number of words as the original. And when and why would you use a summary? That's when you are using another person's ideas but greatly condensing it. What would be the purpose of each of those in writing one of your own essays? Exercise 2, which you should complete after you've finished all of the parts of exercise 1, invites you to look at this paragraph drawn from Charles Freeman, and you're given the page number, it's page 283. And I want you to choose one portion of the passage and quote using one of the sentence starters. So you could say, according to Charles Freeman, comma, and then choose one of these to quote, and then put a citation at the end of it. Charles Freeman points out that. Notice when I'm introducing a quotation with the word that, I do not need a comma with it. Charles Freeman concludes, comma, and then you would have a quotation. Choose one of these. Your seminar or your lab teacher, or I suppose maybe your seminar teacher, will check these to make sure that you're doing this correctly. And then I want you to try paraphrasing the passage above using your own words. Same ideas, put it all into your own words, and then summarize it. The paraphrase should be about as long as the original, and the summary should be shorter. After you're done with these things, get them checked, and then you're ready to start making these own moves in your own writing. And so exercise 3 will guide you to beginning to use sources in your writing, which you will quote, paraphrase, and summarize.